All right, well, welcome everyone. It's 4 o'clock here in Central Time, and we're just getting started with this webinar on creating a virtual ensemble with our special guest, Chris Nelson. So we will wait just a moment as people are joining. We are getting set up to live stream on Facebook as well. So we'll have people from all over the country and maybe beyond joining us. Um, So I know many of you may have attended our webinars before, so welcome back. Many of you might be new to the LSM community, so welcome. We hope this will be an informative and fun and hopefully interactive time together. So I'll just introduce myself. My name is Thomas Bandar. I am the Executive and Artistic Director of Lutheran Summer Music. And again, with us, we have Chris Nelson. I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment. Just a bit of housekeeping. Know that this will be recorded, and I'll send recording and any other materials out to everybody who joined, hopefully by tomorrow. So you'll have all that information. The couple buttons that you have on your screen, those of you joining us by Zoom have a Q&A button, which is a great place to ask questions, and we'll answer those as we go. We might put out some polling so we get some information from all of you as we get started here. And then of course there's a chat feature. And those of you on Facebook, if you leave comments on the Facebook live stream, we'll try to get to those as well. So hopefully we can have a dialogue going as we get started today. So with that, I think I will turn it over to Chris to introduce himself and get us started.
Thank you, Tom. Welcome to all. As Tom said, my name is Chris Nelson, and the Lutheran Music Program and I have had a relationship for a few years now. Pre-pandemic, I served as some tech support for them and continue to do so through today. But then as the pandemic presented itself, I had the opportunity to work with Tom and his staff to create a virtual ensemble earlier this year as they had to cancel their summer music program and wanted to have a way to still connect with the kids. And so we had a lot of fun doing that. And it was actually a great way for me to start to explore this craft. And I'm glad that I have a chance to sort of share some of the knowledge that I've accumulated over the last several months. And hopefully you'll find it to be beneficial for you as well. But just a little bit about my background. I'm a Luther College grad, which I know LSM has some history with, so I have to always call that out to my Luther alumni friends. But I think one of the reasons that I've sort of been set up well to be able to help organizations and ensembles with this is that my background is both in technology and music education. So I've always been a member of a choir and an ensemble of some sort for the last 20 plus years. And I think having that ear and having that experience has helped me sort of understand the sound that I'm trying to achieve in some of these virtual choral ensembles and other instrumental ensembles. So that's been great. In my daytime job, as I mentioned, I do technology support for other organizations. And so that's how I spend my days when I'm not making virtual choirs. I'm helping in an IT support role for larger organizations. So I've been doing some content production and so understand the sort of video and audio world for the last few years. And so that was sort of the last piece that I think has been nice, is that there's just a little bit of a learning curve when it came to some of the audio and video production tools. And so I'll talk a little bit about what I've learned there, but it was nice to have a little head start before it became so critical to our performance life now during the pandemic. I know that Tom has put together a quick poll, and one of the items that we had asked him about was what is the mix of the people that are attending today? It would be good to know because I think it will shape some of the conversation around the advice that I give based on who's attending and sort of what their motivations are for being here. So Tom, maybe you could start with just that question of who's here today and what's their role?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I will just put out this poll for those of you on Zoom. So you should be seeing that momentarily. And hopefully that's out. And if you can't see that, please use the chat to let me know. Good, I see people responding. Just asking what's your background, or specifically what has brought you here today. And you can select more than one if there's two or more of these options. If you're on Facebook, again, we're just asking you your background of what brought you here to this webinar. And the options are if you're a church musician or on staff at a church, if you're a classroom teacher or an educator, if you're a potential ensemble participant, or maybe a past ensemble participant, virtual ensemble, or if you're connected to LSM in some other way, great to know that as well. Just so we have a general idea of where people are coming from and people's background coming into this. So I'll just let this go on for just a couple seconds. Again, if not everybody participates, it's okay. We're getting a good sense of where people are. I'm not going to
I'll
share
certainly
that.
try and address some questions, hopefully from everyone's perspective, but I hopefully will provide a few tidbits that will be important to those that are thinking about creating their own ensembles or their own videos because they lead ensembles today, or maybe you're just a participant and want to know how to best prepare your materials and the way that you can contribute to the production of these virtual ensembles.
So great. Let me I can just share the basic summary here of what people selected. So 84% are coming to us as a church musician or on staff at a church. 21% is a ensemble participant, 18% is another kind of LSM friend, and then 8% is a classroom teacher. So a good mix, but a lot of people from a church background and looking at it as a church musician as well.
Okay, well, that's good to know because I'll certainly make sure that I try and talk about it from that perspective as we continue to work through the presentation here. With that in mind, one of the questions I always get is, am I the right kind of ensemble to participate or create a virtual choir video or virtual band video, whatever it might be that you're trying to do? And I say that there's space for any ensemble to create a virtual ensemble video of some sort, but the way that you prepare based on what your ensemble looks like is probably going to be a little different. And so I'll just start with size. So if you have a smaller ensemble, one of the things that we have to remember is that each singer is contributing their individual voice. And without the support of the ensemble around them, the way that singer or that musician is contributing might be a little different than if they had the support of other singers or players that were next to them when they were giving their performance. And so that can generate some inconsistencies. And what I always say is that if you think about your ensemble size, if you can think about repertoire that you choose that allows your ensemble to have 4 or 5 or even more people on any given part that they're contributing, that allows you to have a nice blend of sound that's coming from each one of those parts. And it also allows you to account for maybe some of those inconsistencies that wouldn't happen if we were all playing together or singing together as an ensemble. And so you can sort of eliminate those inconsistencies because you have the support of more than 1 or 2 people singing that part for them. And hopefully that makes sense. The second thing to think about is certainly the experience level of your ensemble. If you have made a virtual choir or a virtual band video during this time, you will know that singing by yourself or performing by yourself is a very different experience than doing it with the support of your fellow ensemble members around you. And so that confidence in which you sing or perform or play has a big difference in the end result. And so picking pieces that are supportive and take into account the experience level that you're working with is great. So something that you might choose that you know that you could build up over, you know, 8 or 10 or 12 hours of ensemble rehearsal time isn't maybe the best piece to choose. It would be more something that you know that if you're a church musician that you would pull out on Sunday morning because everyone knows the piece and they've all sung it several times before. That's, you know, certainly a repertoire that would be more successful when you're thinking about just aligning with the experience level and the confidence of the performers that you have participating. As far as ensemble type, you know, so I've done virtual choirs, virtual bands, and virtual orchestras. And I would say that that the orchestras and the choirs probably blend the best. There tend to be fewer parts and quick runs, and I'll talk a little bit about repertoire styles that work better later. But you know, again, I would think about that based on your size, that the right ensemble type are groups where you can have either really confident singers or you can have enough singers that are all singing the same parts to accommodate for the inconsistencies that are just inevitable parts of the contributions that each individual performer is providing. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is just your rehearsal style and schedule. Certainly based on your ensemble experience and the repertoire that you choose, one of the things that becomes really important about virtual choir is the ability for that performer to know the piece well and to have internalized the tempos and the movement and any moments of rubato or things like that in the piece and in the performance that you're trying to achieve. Because if they haven't lived with that piece long enough to understand all of those moments of either flex in tempo or dynamic or you know, consistent rhythmic choices that are being made, the more inconsistent the performance is between each individual contributor, and it takes that either comes through in the end product, or it takes a lot more time to sort of get everything to align after the fact. So I might stop there and just see, Tom, is there any questions that came to mind as I'm talking about things that you'd want to ask or that others have come up with while I was chatting?
Yeah, again, if people have questions or comments along the way, please type them into Zoom or Facebook, and we'll answer those as we go. So it'd be great if we can kind of get some feedback and some questions from people who are planning on things or thinking about planning on upcoming virtual ensembles. I found it interesting. You've done band, orchestra, and choir, and the different ensembles there, and kind of good to hear. You know, we did the virtual choir here at LSM, and you're just giving me ideas to think about other kinds of ensembles. Have you done any kind of mixing with voices and instruments? Has that come up at all?
It has not come up yet, although I do have a couple of those on my schedule of videos that I have committed to in the future. So we can have a follow-up session and I'll tell you about the experience. One of the nice things that I really like, you know, there's advantages and disadvantages, and it's really obvious what some of the disadvantages of this virtual performance looks like. But some of the advantages is that having each individual contribute their video and getting to like mix that in to create the ensemble sounds allow me to create almost a perfect blend no matter what the mix is. So you know, I know that from my personal experience singing in church choirs is that there tend to be, let's say, um, you know, 2/3 or 3/4 tend to be sopranos and altos, and then 25% is the tenors and basses. And that's always hard to balance in real life, but that works out just fine in the virtual world. So my guess is that even balancing bands and choirs, you get to have that same flexibility, where it might be hard under normal circumstances to get the choir to be able to raise to the level of the band or vice versa. That it should be
That's
work pretty well.
that's interesting. It kind of presents some more opportunities even. What about a smaller ensemble like a quartet or a quintet when it's really one person on a part? And again, you're not in a mass large group. Is that possible? What's your experience there?
It certainly is possible, but I would also speak to the experience level of that quartet. Um, a couple of things come to mind. In a quartet, it becomes so important that you're like listening and constantly balancing against each other and tuning against each other when you're in a live performance, and you don't always get that luxury in a virtual setting. So it becomes the producer's job to make sure that you are balanced correctly. And as a producer, I can make some minor tuning adjustments to kind of fix some of those moments, but maybe the less confident or the less experienced the performer is, the harder those small ensembles become to create maybe the musical experience you're hoping to achieve.
Sure, makes sense. Well, if people have more questions about this along the way, we'll come back to this topic. But I think we can go on, and we'll keep putting questions up here, and we'll answer them as we go.
Sure. So the next thing I'll talk about is repertoire. And I think I've already touched on this a little bit, but the first thing I would tell you is that if it fits within the requirements of what you're looking for in a piece, whether it's seasonal or for a specific purpose, if you have a piece of repertoire that the ensemble that you're going to have perform already knows pretty well, and ideally maybe has performed together historically, those have proven to be the most successful in the particular videos that I've worked with. And that's all about that internalization of that piece. We don't realize how much minor fluctuation there is in tempos and rhythmic choices that we sort of all just learn as we're rehearsing a piece, but all of a sudden when it's each individual making those kind of choices on their own, that there's just that challenge to overcome when it's virtual. So I'll just sort of start there. When it comes to duration, I always try and suggest people try and find those pieces that are 2 to 4 minutes. When you're asking your ensemble members to create this recording, it's an enormous amount of energy that it takes to make that recording, because you kind of go into it with, I can't take a break or make a mistake or anything like that. So where you would be able to take a quick moment to yourself inside an ensemble, you can't do that when you're the only person singing in front of the camera. And so when you start to exceed that 4-minute mark, it becomes a lot for the ensemble participant to capture in a single take like they need to for these videos. So the second thing is that I find that repertoire that has pretty consistent tempos throughout the entire piece are great. In fact, the ones that I've only had a couple, but where I've been able to put a click track or a metronome underneath the guide track that I'll talk about in a little bit, that yields, again, the best possible result, because everyone is hearing that or able to internalize that tempo all the time. When you become dependent on watching a conductor or feeling the piece, because there's a lot of moments of either rubato or tempo changes. You just end up with less consistent results from each individual contributor. The other thing is to think about the rhythmic complexity of that piece. Anything with a lot of quick runs or dotted rhythms or things that swing, people are not, we're not metronomes or computers ourselves, so we all sort of feel that just a little bit differently, and that also comes through. So something to think about there. When you're choosing the right piece that works for you, I always tell people that to try and find a performance that you really like, that we can use to mimic, and go from there, especially when it's an a cappella piece. So if you're going to choose a cappella, the best way to get the singers to sort of sing as an ensemble, even though they're all contributing individually, is when they have a choir to sing along with in their guide track. If they're singing to, let's say, someone playing a reduction on a piano, it misses some of those elements, so that's not great. On the other hand, if you're going to choose an accompanied piece, then having that accompaniment that sort of drives the tempos and the movement of the piece, so that the singer isn't making all of those decisions on their own, can be really, really great. The other thing to think about is, if it's an accompanied piece, sometimes there will be, let's say, a cappella movements, so 1 or 2 measures of a cappella before the piano comes back in, and that becomes difficult just for timing. So I always tell people to be aware of that, because during those couple measures of rest, people are expected to sort of sing a cappella and hope that we all arrive at the accompanied part again together, and that's challenging. So think about that. And then homophonic versus polyphonic. I'll just tell you as a producer, things that are homophonic are much easier to blend together and to sort of cover up those inconsistencies, versus when you choose something that's maybe early music style, or each individual part has their own independent lines. Those become just more challenging to line up and blend and get to work. So yeah. Any questions, Tom, before I move on to the next section?
Unmute myself here. One going back a little bit, just we had the question about a small quintet or quartet ensemble. What about just thinking through a very large group that's like a community chorus type ensemble, where you have many people on a part? Any extra things we should think about there?
No, I mean, in fact, like, the more people that participate, the better the end result of the musical offering is. So I would not say that you have to limit yourself that way, but I will talk about the size of the ensemble again when we get to the section of, like, are you trying to create one of these things on your own, or even hire a producer to do it? Because there's not really like a scalable process that you can take into account when we have all these virtual ensembles. So having 100 people participate is effectively almost 10 times the amount of work than having 10 people participate, because it's that many more individual voices or instrumentalists that have to be layered in and balanced and blended into the final product. So I think it creates a little complexity there, and something that you should think about. But I do think you actually end up with great results.
Thank you. Well, I think everything you were saying about choosing this right piece seems more important than I ever imagined, and the duration, the tempos, the complexity, and that's all very fascinating. So I think, again, keep the questions coming, and let's keep going.
Sure. So I think that there are a few, I call them required materials, but just the materials that are going to set you up for being successful when doing a virtual ensemble. I'll start with like score markings or a marked score. Often we just want to hand out a piece of music, and during the rehearsal process, we expect our singers or our players to make their own notes as they're making, either observations about their own performance that they need to account for, or that they're seeing from the conductor that they need to account for. But because we're getting either limited or, definitely not less than ideal version of a rehearsal compared to live gatherings, having a consistently marked score across all of the ensemble members is important, so that no one's making decisions on their own when it comes to, let's say, breath marks or cutoff moments. It might be something about tempos or rubatos or retards and things like that. And so just making sure that all of those things are being decided ahead of time. One of the sort of, I guess I'll call it more critical points that maybe the more advanced ensembles would be thinking about are vowel choices and moments where you might be closing that vowel to the consonant, choosing shadow vowels, where your S comes in a marking. So all of those things, when we aren't, having a regular rehearsal that might get hashed out and addressed, those things have to be addressed in a marked score if you want to avoid those pitfalls in the end. The next thing is a rehearsal track. And depending on the level of your ensemble, I suggest that you create a rehearsal track for each one of your parts. And then that rehearsal track aligns with the tempo choices and duration that your actual performance is going to reflect, so that you're not practicing either at a different tempo or making different artistic choices in the rehearsal process than you would be when you actually go to create your video contribution. And that's again about that internalization process, is that anything we can do to sort of be virtual but create a unified set of decisions, just like we would as when we are all performing together, is really important. And then the last piece that I find really helps is this sing or play along guide. So every time I work with an ensemble, I provide one of these sing along guides. And the first thing it does is it takes a couple of minutes to just clearly set the guidelines and instructions of preparing that musician for their virtual video contribution. So it talks about getting into the right space. And that's like finding something like Tom's background that's a more neutral background versus my background that has a bunch of stuff, right? So while my space might be well curated for a webinar, Tom is well suited for a virtual performance because there's not a lot of distracting backgrounds. So that can be really beneficial when we can just have those neutral elements. The other thing is I talk about the camera setup because as you can imagine, everyone sort of takes a video their own way, but a handheld selfie video, doesn't come across as well as one that's set up on a tripod, and one that's in landscape orientation, or at least consistent orientation across all the performers, is really important versus maybe having some videos that are vertical and some videos that are horizontal. We ask people to think about the sound around them. So, the only way that it works is if we can layer everyone's contributions on top of each other, but layering those contributions means you also get all of the background and ambient noise. So that's dogs barking and construction equipment and cars driving by. It's the vibration of your phone when it buzzes. If you don't have that silenced, it's the it's the hum of your chest freezer that you set up your camera right in front of because you did this in your basement. So all of those things are really important. I received one yesterday where they decided to submit their contribution while they were sitting in the back of their car being driven to school, but the car was like actually going down the road, and all of the elements that you can think of in traffic and road noise and other members in the car come through. So it's really impossible to like remove those things. So sound is important. And then the other thing that I really try and stress is lighting. Having good light in front of you and as little light behind you is really helpful. So things like overhead lights that are really harsh coming right down on you, or having a window behind you, that makes it really hard to sort of balance that image when you go to make your final product. Things like keeping the camera at eye level so that we don't have it looking up your nose at the ceiling fan and the light in the background can be really great to avoid those moments. So anyway, that was a very long-winded way of saying that just setting expectations and having a guide for those singers so that you get a consistent performance is really important. Tom, do you have a question?
No, I was just going to say it's very helpful. I remember when I'd done a couple of these, having these very basic guidelines is really, it was really key for also just making the performer feel comfortable, because there's might be some anxiety on that end about how do I hold the phone? Where do I do this? Do I do it in front of a window? All these things you're saying. So that's
right.
helpful.
I have to remember that these are things that I think about all the time because I'm doing lots of these videos, but if you're a first-time performer, it might not be as obvious to that person participating. So giving them a chance to understand the best environment in which to create these videos is important.
There's a lot of these details you might not think about until you get ready to do your video, and all of a sudden you have a lot of questions. So that's really helpful. We did have one question pop up. I think it might be something that you will address later, but just to make sure, a question about people buying and using all the same recording equipment at home and how they send it back to you. Is coming up in a future slide?
I'll address it right now. And I would say that the recording equipment, obviously, the nicer the equipment you have, the nicer it is, but I don't think that there should be an expectation to participate in a virtual ensemble that any special equipment needs to be attained. Hopefully, I know that it's a bit of an assumption, but somewhere that participant has access to a couple of devices. One of the things that is included in that guide that I provide is that someone uses one device to listen to that sing-along or play-along track using a pair of headphones. So there's two pieces of equipment that people need. They need to be able to hear the guide that they're singing or playing along to in a pair of headphones so that it doesn't show up on the video that they're recording. And then they need another device to actually record their performance. So this can be something as simple as two smartphones, a computer and a smartphone, an iPad and a smartphone. But if people don't have smartphones, but they've got one of the old point and shoot cameras that can capture video, or if they're Chromebook or laptop or iPad or anything like that, all of them are capable of capturing video. And while they might not all capture an equal quality of video. I think that most of them are in a position to do it in a way that's, quote, good enough for these virtual performances. I would say that it's more important that you set up your sound and lighting conditions than it is to have, let's say, a fancier piece of equipment to capture your performance.
And another question that just popped up kind of along the same lines is, how do you help participants who are not as familiar with technology or may have older technology, which is a little bit what you're already talking about?
Right. So, I mean, there's a few ways to address this. I do provide this guide, and I told Tom that I would be happy to share. I created both a little PDF printout that people can use, as well as this 2-minute video that people can watch. And I will make sure that Tom has access to that and can share it with you, because it will walk people through the instructions. And obviously they can play that video as many times as they need to sort of get comfortable with it. The other thing that I offer my my collaborators that I do virtual choirs work with is I can certainly participate in one of their rehearsals and just be a question, or a source of answers if people have questions, so we can have a dialogue about it. And then in those situations on organizations that I collaborate with, I also always give out my contact information and try and help. So, certainly whoever you're working with, whoever your technical collaborator, make sure that you have access to them to ask questions. And then peers are great, right? So let those within your ensemble or within your group that do understand it, be a leader for the rest. And it's a little bit of role reversal. You might think of your more senior musicians being leaders within the ensemble to the younger musicians, and in this case it might be the younger musicians that have a better grasp of the technologies to help their older ensemble members. So
that's great, thank you. Yeah, I think we can go on. We'll keep reviewing questions as they come in.
Sure. The last thing in that play along guide that I provide, and what I'll give to Tom, is creating a sync moment. So if you're thinking about doing this yourself, one of the more daunting tasks is just aligning every single contribution that comes in so that everyone's singing or playing together. And so in this guide that I provide, I give people a sync moment, and it just has a little metronome click, and then after 4 beats, they clap on one together. And with everyone clapping on one, it gives me a very specific point, both visually and orally, to go and look for to help align everyone. Because when you have that moment, it's more consistent than you might find trying to align them using just their singing. And then in that sing or play along track, people often ask, do I have to conduct or not? And I always say that that's a choice, but when you have the opportunity, having a conductor certainly makes a difference, especially when it comes to moments of onset and cutoffs and tempo changes, because when they have something to look for and they're not just trying to feel the song or the piece as it's playing along, and they're trying to make their video, that can be particularly helpful. So if you are going to add a conducting video to the sing-along guide or the play-along guide, I always tell people that it's not about how artistic your conductor video is. It's more about how much of a drum major you can be, because having really clear beats with a clear ictus is really beneficial to the performer. So, okay. Moving on, one of the items that people forget about is the amount of just content that is being created. So when you make, let's say, a 4-minute video with a smartphone, those tend to come in and they are 200 to 400 megabits in size. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, that's okay. But if you have 10 participants, that's 2 to 4 gigs of space. And if you have 100 participants, that's 200 to 400 gigs of space. And that's an enormous amount of just video content to capture. The file sizes are too big to email. So you can't just say, email me your file. And then once you do have a way to effectively get them all consolidated, making sure that you have enough, let's say, cloud space or disk space to store all of these also becomes really important. So the things that I suggest is that if you're a smaller ensemble, you might have plenty of space to just take care of it with some standard free services like Google Drive, Dropbox, I'm sure iCloud. There are a variety of ways to do this. Certainly Google and Dropbox, OneDrive is the Microsoft product. They have ways for people to make folders publicly available so everyone can just upload to a single location. And that makes it really nice as long as you have enough disk space in that folder so that everyone can contribute. Dropbox in particular has a file request feature, which is really nice, which means you can set up a directory and then create a link and email that link out to people. When they click that link, it brings them to a page that asks them to upload the video, and it automatically places it with their name on the file in the directory that you set up. So that's my personal choice that I choose to work with, and that's been really great. Just know that all of these tend to have maybe 2 to 10 gigs of space that are free, and then they become paid services. So you might have some expense there if you're trying to make these on your own and you need a place to store all of these videos. The other thing is that remember that people are creating these videos with their phones and their tablets, and so they come in with very random file names. So a service like Dropbox requires them to enter a name, which at least gives you the person that is contributing to the file, and that can help a lot. The other thing that I do is I also create a directory for each part. So whether that's soprano, alto, tenor, bass, or that's string, winds, and percussion, whatever that is, at least I have a starting place to know kind of where they fit in, and it helps just organize those files a bit. And then the last thing that I will tell you is that you're going to end up, setting a due date, whatever your project is, for everyone to submit their videos, and that you not wait till the last day to look at those videos to see what people have given you, because despite good intentions by all, there are inevitably a few that will need to be redone. And it's really disappointing when there isn't time for that person to resubmit if they really wanted to participate in that virtual ensemble, because if it's, a bad file, it's corrupt, it doesn't meet whatever your requirements are, it's sad when then their image doesn't get to show up in the end product. So take time to look at that and give people a chance to redeem their submissions. Any questions that have come up so far, Tom?
Yeah, just one, and again, you might be getting to this, but somebody asking, what computer programs do you use to put the song or singers together?
Yeah, I will. I'll address a couple of things. So I have a screen here that talks about if you want to do it yourself, um, of some both tools that I use and some tools that are out there on the market to consider. So give me a few minutes and
Sure.
I will come back to that one.
Perfect.
The next thing I do want to talk about is the technical collaborator, right? And as schools and as churches, it's not in everyone's budget to be able to work with a professional producer all of the time. These videos can get quite expensive quickly, depending on what you're trying to achieve. And so trying to, obviously there's many churches have either technical resources that run their sound and video equipment inside their sanctuary on a regular basis, or they might have some congregant members that are really strong volunteers and want to help you with this. So as you're thinking about who might be great people to tap on the shoulder, I would tell you that while audio and video engineers can execute all of the technical steps to create these videos, if you can find people that actually understand sort of the art of ensemble music and how that relates to creating proper blend and acoustic and having an ear for a balanced ensemble and being able to read a piece of music to create dynamics. Dynamics are a little bit of a fabricated effect when it comes to virtual. But if you think about the nature of the contributions that each ensemble member is providing, depending on the piece of equipment that they used, how far away they were standing from the microphone, how loud the gain was turned up on their video, and what they interpreted as forte moments and pianissimo moments. What you get, has to be blended and balanced against everyone else. So you sort of have to create a level playing field for all members, because no matter what we do, we can't come in with the expectation that all video submissions and audio submissions are created equal. So we have to create that equilibrium. And so when your video or when your technical collaborator understands those elements, you will end up with a much better product in the end. And then the other thing is that, someone who understands virtual ensembles would be really great. The first thing is that dealing with 20 videos playing at the same time is a very different technical skill set than someone who can create, one video or take the feed from the congregational live stream and put it out there. So there's a little bit of a different skill set. So understanding if someone has that certainly helps a lot. It also might give you the opportunity to do something beyond just creating boxes of people performing. You might get a more engaging or more cinematic result as well. But to go back and address Tom's question before, if you're thinking about doing this yourself, there are a few tools that I can talk to and recommend out there. If you're thinking about trying to do this on your own, I always suggest that you do the audio and the video separately and then bring them together in the end. I don't really feel like there's any programs out there that do both at the same time very well, especially when you're trying to create a choral or an ensemble type of sound. So when you're thinking about your audio equipment or your audio software, if you're an Apple or a Mac user, GarageBand is a free program that's included with your Mac operating system, or you can even do some of it like on an iPad. There's a version for you out there. And I would say that if you have a smaller ensemble and this is your first time, that is a program that is absolutely capable of doing everything you need it to. There's the Pro version, which is Logic Pro, which has a bit more control, but if it's not a software that you're familiar with, you know, it has a price tag of a couple $100, and I wouldn't say that it's worth your extra time. If you're a Mac or a PC users, then you have a couple more options: Pro Tools, Audacity, and Adobe Audition. With the exception of Adobe Audition, there's kind of a free version of these tools, and then there's a paid version of these tools. So you could certainly look to see what your school or your church might have already available or they own. But those are great places to start if you're just looking for something if you're looking for software to choose. If you're a Mac user, I might point you towards GarageBand, to take a look at that, because that would be free for you. On the video side, again, if you own a Mac, it comes with free software called iMovie. I would say that this is a pretty limited version of a video creation. I think it would handle most video types well, but because of all of the layers of a virtual ensemble, it's not quite set up for that. So its Pro version is Final Cut, and that is a great tool to make these. It certainly has all of the software capabilities of handling that, and that's what I build all of my videos in. And then if you're looking for some things that might work on other computers besides a Mac, if you're a PC person, Adobe Premiere and DaVinci Resolve are great things. I would remind you that if you're looking at video production, the horsepower of your computer is really important. Trying to process, 10 or more videos simultaneously on your computer is very processing intensive. So if you have access to a computer either at your school or at your church that's designed for these kind of production things, I might suggest that you try and work on that versus, say, your standard laptop that you might be working with. And then if that all sounds really daunting, I would tell you about two things out there. One is called the Acapella app. Acapella is one word. That's not a typo. So when you're searching for it, that is what it looks like. And it can be used, I believe, on a smartphone or on a tablet. So it's not even really designed for a PC. It has both a free version and a paid version, and it allows you to have up to 9 participants. So if you want to do some smaller ensemble work, it's really great. You upload a guide track, kind of like what we talked about before, and then you send a link to each of the people that you want to participate, and then they get access to that guide track and they record their own submission, and then it brings them all back to the project owner for bringing them together, and you can do a little bit of mixing and balancing right inside that app. My trick that I will tell you is that the paid version of that app that allows the 9 people to participate is $50, and that's $50 per participant, or for every phone that you want to have it on. So if you send your guide track to the participants and have them all upload their videos to, say, one of those services that I talked about before, the owner of the Acapella project can buy a single version of that app for $50 and then upload all 9 videos themselves, and that will save you $400. So hopefully that's great. And then there's some newer technology out there called songalong.live. That's the website. And it's actually a person from the Twin Cities and a person from out on the East Coast that has really tried to embrace the virtual ensemble requirement here, and gives you a chance to kind of set up a project, set up a guide track, and then you can email it out to all of your ensembles, and it automatically creates the software for you. I would, I think it's just important to have the right expectation going in. You don't get a lot of control over, say, balance and blend and alignment, but it gets you 90% of the way there. And I actually think it has an option that allows you to export those results in a way that someone can further refine it if they have the tools or skills necessary. So, but if nothing else, it gives you a product in the end. So there's some tools out there if you're looking to do it yourself. But Tom, that's what I have. I don't have anything else unless there are other questions.
That's great. Just a couple of questions that came in. One, do you have a basic estimate of the amount of time required for editing kind of per ensemble participant?
Yeah. So I plan, when I do my project estimates, I put in about 30 minutes per participant when I think from the time that I have to collect their video, review it, strip the audio out, and then blend them in and build their portion of the video. That's how long it takes me as I'll have to use the word professional loosely because I wouldn't call myself a professional producer. But so if this is your first time, more than 30 minutes per person that you're going to want to build one of these things.
Well, that's good to know. And then another question about, say, if your classroom is all using Chromebooks, is that a good option too for recording?
Yes, it's just fine. So the Chromebook has been a very popular choice in some of the ensembles that I've worked with. But it does bring up one thing that I wanted to mention is that some people will want to use, let's say, a web conference tool to record because they become very comfortable with, say, Zoom. If I hit the record button at the top, that will create a recording for me. These web conference recording tools are not designed to capture musical performances. So A, it sort of messes with the audio, and B, the audio and the video don't always quite align. So just make sure that you're using one of the native applications on those Chromebooks or whatever your device is, right? So if you can open a camera app or a video app that's actually installed on the computer, that you get a much better performance that way.
Well, great. If we'll have maybe just another minute if people want to submit any further questions. But Chris, this has been incredibly helpful, and I think is giving us a lot to think about as we go to our different directions and think about what's next, and just the complexity behind this, creating something that in the end is so powerful, seems simple and pure, has a lot of work behind it and a lot of thought before we even decide what we're going to do. So this is again, just really helpful. I think just following up on your last point a little bit, Chris, one further question. Are there any other settings on devices that we should consider, especially with an eye towards balance and blend when recording?
Yeah, I mean, so when I share that guide with Tom, and hopefully you'll get a chance to review that, having people a consistent distance from the camera is a good place to start, but a lot of those quote smart devices are making a lot of those decisions for you about how, like, we call it the gain setting, but like how loud the microphone sensitivity is turned up to listen to that participant. So there isn't a lot that you as an individual can do. I do tell my ensembles that even though there might be a pretty large dynamic range in the piece that you select, that it's not necessary to ask your singers to achieve that. It's more about achieving the affect of the dynamic of that section than it is about actually achieving the dynamic, because fortes can very easily overpower microphones, depending on what your instrument or voice is, and then pianissimos can be very hard for them to show up. So just thinking about a dynamic range that kind of falls in that mezzo piano to mezzo forte all of the time, your producer should be able to take care of the actual dynamic result in the end. There's no need to ask your performers to do that. And then remember that, like, if you're a tuba player, you should not be 2 feet away from your camera. You might need to be a little further away and play a little softer, and review your video before you submit it, because it's pretty easy to tell if you've submitted something that sounds good or the microphone has been blown out as a result of it.
Good tips. One more question here. When you combine the videos together, do you show multiple people on the screen at a time or only one at a time? And then what softwares are best for showing multiple people on the screen at one time? And what orientation works best for recording the video? So kind of going back to some of your previous topics.
Right. So I'll start with orientation. I choose to ask all of my collaborators to submit their videos in the landscape orientation, which is sort of the wider one versus the taller view. And just having everyone do that consistently is great. And the reason I choose that is because it not only works in that landscape orientation, but I can usually crop it to work in a square orientation as well. And that gets to the person's next question. One person on the screen at a time or multiple person on the screen at a time. When it's ensemble work, certainly you want to see the ensemble versus, say, one individual contributor at a time. So whenever you can, I try and show more than one participant, but I don't necessarily always try and show everybody at the same time all the time, because being able to feature and highlight members of the ensemble can be really nice. You get to see their their actual performance and their facial expressions and things like that. So that's good. I don't have a lot of experience with different types of software. I can only tell you that I use Final Cut, and Final Cut has some nice plugins available for pretty inexpensive that allow you to make grids of people quickly. And so that has been really helpful for me to create large back walls of participants during the production process.
So we'll just do one final question here, and then we'll wrap up, since it's just a couple minutes past an hour. One topic that we didn't get to, I'm wondering if you have experience in this, Chris, is copyright. And we're used to thinking about that in our schools and churches, but we might be venturing into new genres here for people, and how this relates in the virtual world.
So the first thing I will tell you is, owning the music or a copy of the music for each performer is still required. So just because we might be distributing these scores electronically, it's still the responsibility of the ensemble to own a legal copy for every participant. Streaming rights is another thing that, and performance rights is another thing that we need to think about. So I tell you to often start with the publisher, because those are the people that have control over what they call the mechanical licenses and the streaming licenses. And you can often get a license that will cover your particular performance, and you can get them, let's say, a certain number of streams or an unlimited number of streams or time periods. So there's a number of variables there that you can think about, but it is not safe to assume that simply buying a copy of the piece of music gives you the right to put it online and to start to stream it. So the publisher is a good place to start. If you have a relationship with the composer, if it's a living composer, I know many of them are trying to make exceptions during this time of COVID, since that's the only performance opportunities that are available to ensembles. So they've done them at free and reduced streaming prices. But yes, you need score copies, so you need to pay for the score, and you also need to probably cover at least some expense when it comes to the mechanical license. So, oh, maybe one more topic on that, Tom, and
Sure.
that is, even though you might get the streaming rights, often when you put these onto social platforms or onto YouTube, they will still get flagged for copyright. It doesn't mean that you don't have the right to stream it because you paid for the streaming license, but what it does say is that you don't have the right to monetize this. So if you are thinking about doing one of these virtual ensembles for the purpose of like selling tickets or raising money through streaming the video, that's a very different license, and you should think about that as well. But that is almost never included as part of a standard streaming or mechanical license.
Good, lots to think about here too. Well, again, I will be in touch with everybody who registered on Zoom by tomorrow with a recording of this webinar and some of the resources that Chris was talking about. And this will be available for future viewing. So if you want to see it again, share it with somebody who couldn't come today as you start to collaborate on projects, a good chance to look back at this. So again, Chris, a big thank you. This has been extremely informative, and we're just really appreciative of your time today and sharing your expertise with us.
Great. Well, thank you, Tom.
All right, take care, everybody. Have a great week. Bye.